Well, there you have it. I guess it's Slafkovsky season. Well, hello, friends, and welcome to this special edition of Habs Hockey Report right here on the All Habs Hockey Magazine YouTube channel, part of Rocket Sports Media. I am your host, Amy Johnson. I'm also the lead correspondent over at ahlreport.com, and as I promised on this week's regular Thursday episode, we are back Friday night just after the 2022 NHL Entry Draft has ended for a special episode of Habs Hockey Report, bringing you all of the stats on every pick, trade, or move that the Montreal Canadiens took care of while taking care of business at the Bell Center for this year's entry draft. And boy, did it start with fireworks. We've got a lot of information to cover. This is not going to be a traditional episode where we go through a few different segments. We're just going to get right into things. If this is the first time that you are catching our channel, I invite you to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We are here every Thursday, typically, all year long, 52 weeks a year. There's no off season here at Habs Hockey Report, bringing you the latest updates and news on the Montreal Canadiens, the Laval Rocket, Habs prospects, and also featuring a ton of fan interaction as well. So if that sounds like something that is right up your alley, hit that subscribe button. If you are a longtime viewer already, welcome back. And we've got a lot to talk about, lots to cover. First, I did want to give a tip of the hat to everyone who had the good fortune to be in the Bell Center for this event the last 2 days. Certainly a memorable event, a memorable occasion. The weather was beautiful outside for the red carpet walk-in, seeing all the prospects come in. In fact, here you see a great picture there. This is our Rocket Sports Media group who was at the Bell Center for this year's draft. We have a combination of Rocket Sports team members and guest ticket winners who are just fans of hockey from all over North America and fans of teams all over the place who come together every year, courtesy of our continued partnership with the NHL, who provide tickets. And we had a great group there this year. We had fans representing the Montreal Canadiens fan base, the Colorado Avalanche, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and even the Vegas Golden Knights. A really terrific group. You see them there. And all throughout the draft, we had some great look-ins from guys like Randy and Michael and even Christina. Just all sorts of fun to be had at the Bell Center. We thank you so much for your enthusiasm, and it was just a memorable event and a ton of fun. That's what we've heard from everyone, is that they just had a blast. And so we still don't know yet where the draft is going to be held next year. Hopefully we'll be back to our annual ticket contest, and we'll have details on that next summer. That's a little far away for right now, but right now we were just happy that there was a successful in-person return to the NHL draft. And so let's talk about that first round. It was, as we talked about in Thursday's preview episode, in the hours leading up to the draft. It was down to basically, was it going to be Wright or Slafkovsky? Shane Wright has been projected to be the first overall pick for this draft for years now. I mean, it's been a really long time, and it's something that I'm sure that he and his family have built up expectations for. Admittedly, as we got closer and closer, I'd say within the 1 to 2 hours, 90 minutes prior to the start of the draft, I started to get this gut feeling that Montreal was going to go with Slafkovsky, not the least of which was that they had one final meeting with him that had been postponed from earlier in the week, but had a meeting with him on draft day. And so I didn't have any particular inside tips or sources. I just had this gut feeling, and, well, wouldn't you know, sure enough, with a giant splash, selecting first overall in the 2022 NHL Entry Draft, the Montreal Canadiens bucked the trend, did not take the long-time favored number 1 pick, Shane Wright, and instead went with a winger. Went with Uri Slafkovsky. He is a left winger. We've heard him say multiple times that he would be a great addition to a Suzuki-Caulfield line. Of course, he is the first Slovakian taken at this position. He's a tall guy. He's 6'4", 229. Played last year in Liga for TPS, so he's accustomed to playing against men. He does come with quite a personality, and I have a feeling that played not a small part in the decision for Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon and Jeff Molson, who also happened to be in that meeting with Slafkovsky on Thursday morning. His on-ice production certainly has to live up to being a first overall pick, but I think the personality and the confidence and the swagger also played a part here. Being a first overall draft pick comes with a lot of media attention, particularly when it's the Montreal Canadiens who are selecting you, and particularly when they are selecting you in the city of Montreal. There will be a tremendous amount of pressure on this young man. Kent Hughes did say after the first round was over that their goal is to have Uri play in North America next year. He would not commit to whether or not that would be NHL or AHL. He talked about how it's going to take, development camp, rookie camp, training camp, and see how things go. But I would bet that they're going to try to get him into the NHL lineup this fall. So certainly a polarizing pick. Shane Wright, very mature and professional, offered him a sincere congratulations when the selection was announced. I think even the bigger surprise was watching Shane Wright slide and fall to 4th in this draft, with the Seattle Kraken actually getting to pick him up. And that's not necessarily because Shane Wright wasn't really a first rounder, first overall worthy candidate, but New Jersey and Arizona had very specific needs, and that's what they went after. Yes, they absolutely could have taken Shane Wright, but they had needs. Arizona had been widely known to be very high on Logan Cooley, and so that's who they ended up taking. And Simon Nemec is who New Jersey ended up with. Again, a player that they were very high on as well. So, Seattle got lucky that Shane Wright fell to them at 4th, and he's going to be just fine in a Seattle Kraken sweater, and his career will be hindered not at all. So that didn't stop the drama, though, in the first round, because let me tell you, that opening 10 or 15 minutes of the draft was a whirlwind. Then, all of a sudden, 2 trades to announce at once by Gary Bettman. Both involving the Canadiens. And we saw the Canadiens trade away. This was a big shocker for me. I will say right up front, I don't love this trade. But we're going to have to wait and see how it all works out. Traded away Alexander Romanov. Traded away Romy. And pick number 98 in this year's draft to the New York Islanders for their 13th overall pick. Then they turned around and they packaged that 13th overall pick and their own 66th overall pick to Chicago in exchange for center Kirby Dach. It's one of those things. Romanov has a lot of potential. Romanov was one of the few players, and particularly prospects, on the Montreal Canadiens roster this past season who actually had a good season all the way through, even while Ducharme was still there, not just the Marty St. Louis era at the end of the season, the second half of the season. Romanov was actually one of the few bright spots all throughout the season because he had shown growth in his game, maturity, and was really starting to embrace his role. So I'm disappointed to see this prospect be moved along. I think that he'll be successful in New York with the Islanders, but it's for me it's a bit of a hard pill to swallow. I know, I'm the first one to admit, I've told everyone on this channel plenty of times over the past few weeks, there are absolutely going to be players who are fan favorites who are going to go. As someone who analyzes the moves that the Canadiens make, I have yet to see the positive, the sheer positive side of this, because Kirby Dach has not lived up to expectations. Yes, he was a third overall selection a few years ago, but he's not lived up to that. He had 9 goals this past year. And so looking to see where he's going to fit on what this roster will eventually look like is a big question mark right now. And so we're going to have to wait to see how all of that works out. This was, I mean, it blew everyone. It just blew things wide open at the draft and was certainly a very big surprise. There was a lot of speculation that Kent Hughes would trade the 26th overall pick to move up in the draft to perhaps take someone else. Maybe get another second top 10 pick or maybe a top 15. And that ended up not happening. Instead, this was the deal. And he did admit that they already knew that the Kirby Dach deal was going to get done before he drafted Slafkovsky. So it's all a game of cat and mouse, little game of chess going on. And certainly provided plenty of excitement for folks watching on TV, folks who were there in the Bell Center, it was quite something to behold. But the Canadiens weren't done there. Their second pick of the night in the first round was 26th overall, and they went with another Slovak. They went with Filip Mesar. He is a right winger and a little smaller. 5'10", 174, played in Slovakia last year for Poprad. This, as you'll see as we go through these selections, while Juraj Slafkovsky's got great size, a big frame to grow into and build off of, the theme as far as the stature for the rest of the draft for Montreal was not size, that's for sure. Kent Hughes obviously leaning more towards the skill and speed side of things and not adding a ton of size to the Canadiens through this draft for sure. We know that has worked against them in the past, although yes, one can argue that there are aspects of today's NHL game that are changing and trending in that direction, but you do still need size. And so it will be interesting to see how all of that shakes out. So another Slovak with Slafkovsky, Nemec, and then Mesar going 26th. That was 3 Slovaks being selected in the first round, which was a monumental night for their country and for hockey in Slovakia. Apparently Filip Mesar and Juraj Slafkovsky have long been very, very, very close friends. So it's pretty fun for them to be able to be both drafted to the Montreal Canadiens as very good friends and countrymen and guys who have played hockey together in their youth and so forth. So very fun to see there. Then we switch gears to Friday. Things moved lightning quick for rounds 2 through 7, thankfully. The past couple of years of the remote draft, things moved like quicksand. Things were very sluggish the last few years. That was not the case on Friday for rounds 2 through 7. So let's walk you through what happened. In the third round, the Canadiens had 2 picks. And first up, I should start with the second. Maybe I should start with the second round because they had the very first pick of the day. The very first pick of the day was 33rd overall, the first pick in the second round. And that went to Owen Beck. Owen Beck is a centerman, just 5'11", 187, but he has played this past season in the OHL for Mississauga, so getting another centerman there. So with their first 3 picks, took care of all 3 positions in the forward core. left wing, right wing, and center. Later in the second round, at 62nd overall, they finally drafted their first defenseman for this year, going with Lane Hutson, who is a very small defenseman. He was listed at 5'8", 158 pounds. Played this past year for the U18 team for the U.S. National Team Development Program, the U.S. NTDP. And so believe that he is college committed already, and that's your first defenseman, although he is slight. He is slight at only 5'8". Then we move to the third round. Two selections in the third round. We've got at 75th overall, we've got Vinzenz Rohrer, another centerman. This young man is from Austria. He is 5'10", 167, and played for the Ottawa 67s this past year in the OHL. So that's another centerman, but again, in the same kind of stature as Owen Beck at just 5'10". 92nd overall, still in the third round, we see another defenseman get drafted. This is Adam Engstrom, a Swede who is finally another guy who's cracked the 6-foot mark. He stands at 6'2", 185. He played for Djurgården Junior in the Swedish Junior League this past year. So, there's been a lot of really quality players coming out of Sweden the past few years, and it'll be very interesting to see Adam Engstrom's development as a good-sized 6'2" defenseman, kind of average-sized defenseman there. Then we move to the fourth round, and here things went very quickly. The Canadiens were slated to have the 127th and 128th picks at the end of the fourth round, and then the 130th pick in the fifth round. So 3 picks in 5 positions. They did end up trading one of those. We'll talk about that in a moment. But first off, with the 127th overall pick, they went with Cedric Guindon, a left winger, Canadian left winger. He is 5'10", 170, played for the Owen Sound Attack in the OHL this past year. Are you sensing a theme? These guys that are 5'10" and 5'11". And then they did trade the 128th pick. This was a pick that they traded to the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for Vegas's 4th round selection in next year's draft, in the 2023 draft, which will probably be higher than the end of the 4th round, which is where this year's Montreal 4th round selection was happening. So that was that pick got traded away. But to start off the 5th round, just a couple of picks in, at pick 130 overall, we have Jared Davidson, another Canadian. This young center stands at 5'11", weighs in at 179, and has played this past season for the Seattle Thunderbirds in the WHL. So we have, again, as I say, there's a theme there in the size. They're obviously going for the skill and speed aspect. Then at pick 162, which was their 6th round selection, they did take a goaltender. His name is Emmett Croteau, Canadian goaltender. He stands at 6'3", 195, played for Waterloo in the USHL this past year, catches left. And so this was the one and only goaltender that they drafted this year. It's always important to keep goaltenders coming into your system. So Emmett playing in the USHL, we will, standing at 6'3", 195, he could fill out very nicely. It'll be interesting to watch his trajectory. Then they finished things up with 2 7th round picks. Mark Bergevin was always fond of trading away a 7th round pick to the Philadelphia Flyers, and that didn't happen this year. The only selections that they traded away were that 4th round pick that they traded to Vegas, and the picks that they packaged out to the Islanders and Chicago in the Kirby Dach acquisition. Those are the only trades that they made, which was a little surprising, to be quite honest, with how many selections they had this year and looking ahead to how much deeper next year's draft is supposed to be. So they had 2 selections in the 7th round. At 194, they went with Petteri Nurmi, Finnish defenseman, standing at 6 foot even, weighing in at 167, playing for HPK in the Liga this past year. And then finally at 216, they took a Canadian by the name of Miguel Tourigny. This young man stands at 5'8". He's a defenseman as well. So this is another 5'8" defenseman. That's two 5'8" defensemen for the Canadians in this draft. 5'8", 168, played for Acadie Bathurst in the QMJHL for quite a while this year, and has had significant time in the QMJHL. So there you have it. There is your 2022 draft class for the Montreal Canadiens. The feedback forum question this week, here's what I want to know. What are your thoughts and your reaction to the first overall pick, the trade for Romanov, and the selections that the Canadiens made? Just overall, what is your reaction to what the Canadiens did in this year's draft on home turf right there at the Bell Center? Love to hear your responses. Drop those answers in the comment section down below. We'll be sure to read them on next week's show. And we will be back next Thursday to talk about the start of free agency, which is happening next week. Until then, take care. Have a great weekend.